If your web app doesn't serve data, it's doomed to fail. A web app that hooks up to a database allows it to be dynamic. This will allow your site to automatically update a page based on what data is in the database. Let's use a blog for example. Let's say a user navigates to your site and clicks on an author, code with Stein. When they do that, they can see all the different articles that Stein has written about. All the different articles and all the different topics that he's written about. Maybe he's written about Django, he's written about Python, JavaScript, FreeCodeCamp, who knows? Well, if your user just wants to see articles written by Stein about Django, unless you have a page that only lists that information, your user won't be able to see that because you didn't manually code that in, because your site is not dynamic. It doesn't pull data from a database. Another issue occurs when the author Stein publishes an article to the database. If your site doesn't connect to the database, it can't update the author page to include that new article. This means that your users can't see any new articles that you've posted. And this is a huge issue. So ultimately, if your web app can't pull data from a database, your site is static, meaning your pages are hard-coded and they'll never change unless you manually go in and edit the HTML by hand. This is not a scalable situation. So the question is, how do we make a Django web app serve data from a database? The solution is Django queries. Let me show you something. Okay, so let's do a little bit of an overview of the models that we're going to be using for this project. So we have a blog, author, and entries model. Now, we can see that the blog and the author are pretty easy to fill out, it's just a couple fields, whereas the entry has a lot more. Now, we're actually going to kind of stay away from the entries for now. So, if we want to start filling out some data and making some queries, what we're going to do is we're going to need to use the shell, specifically the Django shell, to start doing that. So I'm going to, using VS Code, I'm going to open up the terminal with Control tilde, and that opens things up. Now I have two terminals over here, one that says Python, one that says Bash. On this Python shell, all I did was run the server. So after activating the virtual environment with source v bin activate, I just did Python manage.py run server at the top of my project. And that's all you had to do. So now I'm going to open up a shell with Python manage.py shell. And now this means we have the ability to start adding information to our database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import these models. So from testapp.models import author blog entry. Okay, now I'm going to fill out a blog. So in order to fill out a model, you'll have to first create an instance variable on one side. I'll just say blog. And you set that equal to the class essentially of the blog. So I'll just say capital B for blog, and then you type in the field that you want the data to go into. So the only field I have for this blog is name. So I'll just type in name as a keyword argument, and then using double quotes, we'll just say name, I'll say smart passive income, because that's the name of another blog that we're going to use. And then the tagline, that one's going to be, what is it? Work hard now. Hard now. So you can reap the benefits later. Okay, good. Now, all this data has been put into this blog instance. So if I just type in blog right now, you'll see just the name. But if I type in blog.name, it says that, and then blog.tagline, it actually has the tagline in there. Now, you might think that just by, kind of setting this data equal to the blog, that means it's actually been saved to the blog. That's actually not the case at all. In order to save information to your database, you actually have to call the instance blog. Here, I'll clear the screen for you. You actually have to call the instance. So blog.save. You have to call the instance and then save it. And then that manually makes sure that it actually gets saved to the database. Okay. And we can check this by creating our Django queries. So the way we're going to do that is we're actually going to use the thing called the class manager. So in Django, here I'll actually reuse something from the actual Django documentation. This class manager, basically what you do is you take the class, or in this case the model, blog, and then you use an attribute called objects. Now this objects attribute is called the manager, but you don't really have to like worry too much about it. The idea behind this manager thing is that, and here's a piece of information from the actual documentation, it's the most important attribute of a model is the manager. It's the interface through which database query operations are provided to the models and is used to retrieve the instance from the database. Basically what this means is that when you say, model.objects. Whatever kind of select statement, it pulls data from the database and it saves it to an instance variable for the most part. Right now we're not saving to a variable, but we'll show you. So if I do blog.objects, I say all. This is gonna this command is going to reach into the database and grab all the blogs or all the blog entries. So, we have Django blog, Python, JavaScript, Smart Passive Income blog. That's really cool. That's exactly what we want. Let's say we just wanted to grab one blog. We would just say, let's just grab the Python blog. So we'll say Python. Well, Pyt. We'll just say that because there's nothing there. It's not defined. So we'll just say Pyt. And we'll set that equal to blog.objects.get. And this little get method right here allows us to get one specific item from a query set, which is, the blog basically, at the database. So we'll say get, I think what we can do, if we want to just get one thing, we can just use a little shortcut. We'll say ID equals 2. Because if we look here, it looks like the Django blog. Oh, actually, I think it's ID equals 1. We'll see. Maybe, I think it's offset by 1. So Django blog, I think this is 0th position. Python blog, that might be 1. Let me go ahead and do this. And then we'll say Pyt. And, okay, no, never mind. It's 2. Okay, cool. So now we're able to retrieve one specific query item from the database, and that's good. We were able to grab all of them with this command, with the .all objects command, and we were able to get just one. Now, if I want to do something like pyt.objects.all, or even just .get, I don't know, or just pyt.objects.all, you'll see that this is actually going to have an error. So it says manager isn't accessible via the blog instances. All this means is that you can't use the blog instance, this variable, pyt, to grab all the objects. You have to specifically use blog.objects.all in order to get everything from your database. Now, the simple way to understand this is to just think about what this, equation really looks like. If we have pyt equals blog.objects, objects dot all. If you just look, the only way you're going to get the objects is on the right-hand side of the equation, never on the left. only the right. So that's just the way I think about it. Okay, now let's say you wanted to create a slightly more custom query by filtering out some entries from the query set. We can see that in this query set right here, there are these entries called Django blog, Python blog, JavaScript blog. Well, what if we only wanted to have a query set with a bunch of entries that had the word blog in it and not any entries that didn't have the word blog in it? Well, because we have this one entry here, Smart Passive Income, that does not have the word blog in it, if we do, blog.object.entry.all, then we're not actually able to get what we want. So to create a custom query, what I can do is I can set this equal to, I can create an instance variable called pyt blog.objects.filter, and this filter method allows us to filter stuff out. So I'm going to filter a query based on the field name, right? Just like what we have here up in the blog. So name, and I'm going to use something called a field lookup. And this field lookup allows us to test whether or not something is, it's what helps us create custom filters. So name underscore underscore contains, and we'll say the string log. And that worked. So we'll just say pyt, and look at that. Every entry that has the word blog is here, and the word in the blog Smart Passive Income is not in here. So that's exactly what we wanted. Okay, now let's say you actually wanted to exclude every query set object that had the name blog in the title, had the word blog in the field name. Well, the way we could do that, we can create that instance variable called pyt, and then access the blog through its objects, and exclude. We'll use the exclude method, exclude, and we'll constrain this lookup based on the name, and we'll do double underscore contains the word log. Now you do have to use, I didn't mention this, but you do have to use the double quotes. You can't use single quotes. That will mess things up. So now if we look at the word pyt, if we look at the contents of the variable pyt, we only have Smart Passive Income. And that is our first stepping stones to creating slightly more complex filtered queries that are custom to what we want. You now know a little bit more about Django queries. Now you know how to save data using the Django shell. You even know how to pull all of the data from a database. You can even create custom queries to present custom information to your users. Knowing what you know now, there's a little bit more hope that your web app will succeed and bring your users joy.